maybe it's a yin and a yang, I'm not sure, but there is a different paradigm of what a successful business looks like. And I think as we integrate more of the feminine into business, we come up with better outcomes. And I'm starting to see that now, and hopefully that's what Wild Idea is reflecting. I mean, you can create a business from a sense of joy and fun and, flow and happiness. If that's the underlying energy or emotion that fuels your inertia, then you can have a far better outcome anyway. And I'm not saying I've got the exact formula for that, but it's a much better ideal to aspire to.
This is Stokely, where we tried to be involved, to listen and learn, for us all to evolve. So welcome to you and welcome the world. We hope you enjoy the stories to be told. Stokely is a creative endeavour to listen, learn and evolve through the art of conversation. And here's your host, Mael.
Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us here on Stokely. And today I get to speak with Adam Gibson, who heads up Venture Organic. And they're considered a venture catalyst. They incubate and encourage startups and innovations to create exponential outcomes in the space of the sustainable food system. And they do that because they believe that these businesses are a primary agent for change, and they deserve to be supported and assisted in being as successful as possible. Over the past 9 weeks, I've been in a Wild Idea Incubator with Adam, and it's been really incredible to share every Friday morning with him and his team. We've definitely covered a lot of ground in regards to startups and how you get an idea into a fully flowing business and gain investment and support from people and a community. So that's been really interesting, and Adam has a wealth of knowledge. We really walk the tightrope on this conversation between two seemingly opposing topics, which are business and spirituality. But as you see, there's a real thread that joins those two together. And once you think that we're going too far into one part of that realm, we kind of swing it back and get back into the other. So if you feel like we're going one way or about to lose you, just hang in there for a couple more minutes and you'll find yourself in the other court. Adam's got a lot to share on those two topics and life in general, which has been really, really interesting to listen to and to get to know him a little bit more outside of the Wild Idea program that we were a part of. Thanks a lot for tuning in, and I definitely know that you'll get something out of this, be it in one court or the other, and or both of them, and just see that thread. So thanks for tuning in, and if you have anything to let us know about, then ping us a message. We've really enjoyed receiving a couple of those over the last couple of weeks, and we really appreciate you taking the time to do that. We'll get stuck into the podcast, and really want to thank Adam for his time and for his ability to just share his knowledge with us in so many ways. Without further ado, I'd just like to thank the traditional custodians upon the lands which we gather and listen to the podcast and create it. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And I'd also like to recognise the everlasting connection to land, waters and culture. So thanks a lot for joining in. We're always stoked to have you here, and we really appreciate your time. Enjoy. So Adam, thanks heaps for joining me today. It's been, this is a Thursday, and normally we catch up for a Friday morning every Friday for the last kind of 8 weeks in an incubator setting, which is the Wild Idea Incubator. I've been able to poach you to have a chat on the Stokely podcast. So thanks a lot for giving us your time, mate.
Right, it's my pleasure. If I'm not prepared tomorrow, I can blame you, basically. I'll say, look, I was too busy on a podcast. You can get any slides organised.
No worries.
I'm really pleased to join you. It's great. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, we had a bit of a chat before the podcast, and I've really been genuinely blown away by working alongside you and the team you've got with Oda Nada over the last 8 weeks with the Wild Idea Incubator, and I just felt like you're one of those people that has a lot of good information to put out there, and a lot that people could connect with and definitely learn from. So I just thought we've got to get this guy on for a chat, and you're one for a chat too. You were in the podcast game for a little bit there, mate. What happened to your podcast career?
Look, it was quite successful for a little while there while I was running. We had a show called The Entrepreneur's Men's Shed. I just felt there was a space back then, it was about 5 years ago, I guess, for a conversation for men in business that wasn't just all about black and white, rah, 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 go out and make more money and have the biggest swinging dick kind of thing. There was that was the paradigm I felt I was in business as a man. And then I had a whole other part of my life, which was, a bunch of guys in muslin shirts singing and dancing and being in touch with their feelings and doing plant medicine ceremonies and stuff. And I just didn't see where those two worlds interconnected. And there was a space for an integrated approach to business for men that, embraced, I guess, spirituality, just some basic personal development, just some awareness and consciousness, and just a chance for blokes in business to be real. Because I was coaching a lot of men in business at that point, and every time I had a really upfront, deep conversation with all of them, they were hurting. Those guys were really struggling and alone, and the only sort of paradigm they had to work with or do more of was push harder in the business. That was the only sort of outlet they had. I don't know if it was just something I was attracting, but that was just I saw it everywhere, and particularly in myself. So I wanted to create a conversation with some interesting guys, a bit like you're doing now, around with people who had a different perspective on that. And we had a great following. It was interesting. I stopped basically because I was getting too busy with it, and we had another baby at the time, and I thought, oh, that's it. I'm out for a couple I took 3 months off to be the dad at home, and it turned into 2 years. So I took a hiatus from everything professional in that regard.
Sounds like a hiatus worth taking, mate. Do you have a
magic time having that? Yeah, sorry to cut you off there, but it was just something I recommend every man do if you get the chance. It's always, I just feel lucky because obviously not every guy can do it. Don't get me wrong, it costs us a lot of money to do it. Sort of nearly put a lot of financial stress on to, chop one income out of the family, and I was the main breadwinner at the point. But I was just burnt out, and secondly, I just thought, I knew that I got 3 little girls, 3 daughters, all quite close together. They're all under 9. And with my second daughter, I was away, I was working, and I was making a ton of money, and I was flying high professionally, but I missed the first year of her life, and it really killed me how little connection I had with her. And I thought, I will never. And then when the third daughter came along, I thought, well, it's not going to happen again. And now I had the opportunity to have that beautiful time with both those little ones, already with my eldest. It was priceless. I would give up everything to have that apart, rather than the money and the success and everything else. I'd rather have the connection with my kids, and that time created it. So I recommend it, even if it comes at a huge cost for anyone with kids. That was my bit of parenting advice for the morning.
Brilliant, mate. I mean, there's a lot of people that will definitely be able to weave that into their thoughts going forward, no doubt. So, mate, so you must have had some incredible conversations, and again, like we touched on just before we started recording, I've been really blown away by the way you've delivered business advice essentially and startup advice. And I thought that the Wild Idea Incubator was going to be a lot more black and white and digital, as you say, a lot more about business and spreadsheets, a lot more graphs. But I've been genuinely surprised, and I've really enjoyed the kind of angle that you take in the way that you do talk a lot about kind of the emotional intelligence that's involved, and really understanding the reasons why you're doing what you're doing, and trying to align your purpose with going forward. During your time with the Men's Shed discussions that you had, what were some huge takeaways, or what were some conversations that really still land with you today that you can call upon?
Yeah, look, it was a good reflection. Most men I was coming into contact with, and it was certainly true of myself at the time, is the common theme I think I got taught, and I don't know if that's true of a younger generation now, but certainly the guys who are my age and around about, so I was in my mid-40s at the time, and older. We had guys there from sort of early 30s through to late 60s as part of that group, all in business. And the common thing was we were all kind of defining ourselves, identifying as our actions in the world. In other words, my business success defines my worth as a human being. There's that kind of paradigm of identify with my own business more than identify with my own sense of self or spirit. Take my business away, and I've got nothing left, and there's a deep-seated fear that if they were not to be successful, they would almost disappear in the world. They would be of no value to anyone, including themselves. And they wouldn't express it in those terms, but that was kind of the underlying theme that I kept noticing. And it gave me pause to reflect on where that was true for me. I was that guy. I was, charging ahead at life and had to succeed at everything I did and prove my worth in the world and all that sort of thing. And it's exciting to a large degree, and it's a fun act. It's a fun, there's some fun in doing that. But when it becomes a pathology where, you have to be that in order to be of value in the world, to be here, even to have your right to be here, man, it's toxic and it's exhausting. And I ended up hitting chronic fatigue, and I was just hit exhaustion, proper exhaustion, burnout. And a lot of guys were on that same path that I noticed, and they were driving themselves harder and harder to try and overcome that uncomfortable knowledge that they were going to burn out. So there was this, this toxic masculinity, if you want, expressed in business. And it wasn't they were bad men, they were beautiful guys. They were doing good work in the world, they're good family guys, but they were driven. And my argument is like, well, if you stop being driven and stop doing what you're doing, what is left? Who are we when we stop in the world, actually stop and know ourselves properly? Is anyone who is in there really when you stop being defined by your actions and by your successes or your failures? And I think that's the key question most of us need to ask or can ask. And the beautiful thing about it then is once you know yourself to be okay in the world and you're part of a greater ecosystem, if you want, or spirit, or whatever you want to call it, and you have this deep sense of knowing that all is well and you're of value in the world and you have something unique to contribute, the pathology of needing to succeed goes away, and you're left instead with the opportunity to create from a sense of joy and freedom. And your business can be a joyful creation rather than a fucking hard thing you have to get up and do every day because your life depends upon it. That's the bigger takeaway for me. And I guess that with Wild Idea, to go back to your question, that's the underlying thing there is, we got 71 startups in that program, founders of startups. And the last thing I'd wish on any of them is to push them so hard that their lives fall apart and the health goes, family goes, all that. That's not worth anything. If you got to do it at that expense, what's the point? If you can create a business from a sense of joy and fun and flow and happiness, if that's the underlying sort of energy or emotion that fuels your inertia, then you're going to have a far better outcome anyway. And I'm not saying I've got the exact formula for that, but it's a much better ideal to aspire to.
Well, mate, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I just want to kind of make a note, obviously a lot of the work and discussions that you've had in that space have been in relation to men predominantly. Do you feel like the same general concepts apply to all genders and people that don't associate with gender? Is it a male thing, or is it just more of a human thing?
I think I don't know. I think it's a male thing, but I think the key thing is business tends to be a male-dominated paradigm. The keys to success in business, all the sort of formulas and most business paradigms that you get offered, whether they be a coaching program or how to grow a website or whatever, they tend to be male thinking. It's like win, 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 win at all costs, as opposed to this idea of regenerative business, which is what I'm kind of more trying to embrace now, and I'm still exploring that idea. But people like Carol Sanford in the US who run the Regenerative Business Institute, I think it's called. Maybe it's a yin and a yang, I'm not sure, but there is a different paradigm of what a successful business looks like. And I think as we integrate more of the feminine into business, we come up with better outcomes. And I'm starting to see that now, and hopefully that's what Wild Idea is reflecting. I mean, at least half of the group of female founders, and I think the energy of what they're trying to create has that nice balance between, you need to be regenerative business needs, you need black and white figures to make sure it works. You need to make a profit, and you need to, you have to pay your staff and not rely on government funding or whatever else, or charity or whatever, to be inherently regenerative. but it also needs to have this sort of triple bottom line kind of approach, and has some nice outcomes and a good culture and some of the more typically feminine aspects of a culture in a business. So I think they're becoming more integrated, and it's becoming, we were talking before the recording about Patagonia and what you're doing in the world as a company. And that they're very inspiring to me. I think they embrace a lot of that too. So arguably that's some more feminine type archetypes being integrated into a business paradigm. I think the other part of that I'm a big fan of is integrating the idea of the more indigenous approaches to life, and particularly the idea that really resonates. And again, I'm not pretending to be an expert in this area, but the thing that really resonates for me is this idea of the Iroquois nation in the US and North America do the idea of the 7 generational thinking and decision making, where we won't make a decision now unless it has a positive impact or a benefit to 7 generations down the track. People are never going to know. Our relatives and future generations will never meet. But unless it's a benefit to them as well as us, we won't do it. So that to me, if you can bring that into business as well, we end up with a fairly powerful creation.
That sounds incredible. I actually haven't heard of that way of looking at it before. Who did you say the
Iroquois? You're quoting me on stuff I'm only vague. It's Iroquois nation. So it's I can't remember how to spell it exactly, but it's look at 7 generations. You'll find it on the internet and Google it, and you'll see references to it. And they're well known for it in their culture and the way they've passed that on. But I think it's a fairly common thing in most Indigenous cultures, from what I understand. I know the Australian Aboriginals didn't do something now, knowing that 2 generations from now it'll be the natural resource will be gone. They're always thinking ahead. That was just a natural part of survival, and we've kind of lost that in our modern paradigm, and maybe refining it a little bit. There's elements of that emerging elsewhere. Certainly in our Wild Idea, everyone is involved there. I think everyone has a multi-generational approach to what we're doing in terms of biodiversity, saving species, and regenerative agriculture, and looking after the planet. It's not just reactionary. It's like, no, let's do something that has a long-term benefit. So 7 generations. It changes the whole question of. It gives us a whole new paradigm to work within, because I'm like, this is not just about my kids or their kids. It's like, well, they're, my grandkids who I'll never ever meet, great grandkids, have some benefit from this. That's pretty inspiring if you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. What is the old quote? We don't inherit the land off our grandparents. We borrow it off our children. Yeah. And it's just,
that's it. So I think in that paradigm, as a business person, what inspires me, to help other, as a coach as well, I guess, it gives us a bigger problem to manage. And I learned this in a workshop years ago. It's like, most of us tend not to have. It's not the fact that we've got problems. We need bigger problems to solve. We've got stupid little problems, most of us, to solve. Like my Netflix account has gone off, or my frigging internet's not working today, or the plumber's late doing this, whatever. We need bigger stuff to think about, and that's certainly true for me. I know that if I set my mind to big tasks and think 7 generational, I get really inspired. If I start getting caught up in the daily grind of, how do I survive today, or make my life more comfortable, or whatever, it's like it gets pretty boring pretty quick. So, that's one of the sort of tenets of what I coach anyway. From my perspective, is I don't really care that much about your spreadsheet. I want to make sure you're viable, and I don't want to get too far into that. I want to hear what you're here for. I want to hear what you're really here to. What mountains you're going to move in your life,
Yeah, and I mean, that I feel like that comes back a lot to the feminine energy of business, and and Mother Earth. I've done a lot of work recently and looking into some of the archetypal paradigms that exist, and there's Father Sky and Mother Earth, and I can't help but think that like you said, like a lot of people are living up there in the Father Sky energy, and they're so far away from the reality of what's going on the ground. And sometimes we need to get back down to Mother Earth and get grounded. We need to we need to get grounded. And last night I was in a men's circle, and we were speaking about this exact stuff. And I think it's so interesting because we reference the quote that during this time of COVID, it's like planet Earth has sent us to our rooms, and because we're, and the guy who brought it up and said, we've been sent to our rooms. We're in lockdown, or we're in restrictive confinements.
Yep.
And what do you call a child that gets sent to their room? They are grounded,
Yep.
And it's just like when you start to look at it and all these things start to crisscross, it's like, geez,
there's a bit of science behind that too, because there's in natural medicine, because I've been mentoring natural medicine practitioners prior to the current incarnation. That was my space for many years, right? So, and one of the big sort of disconnects in modern life is we get up in the morning, we turn our device, we have Wi-Fi buzzing us all night long. We get up in the morning, we look at TV and Wi-Fi again, and you put your shoes on, you walk on cement out to your car, you get in your car, and you drive with all this electromagnetic energy blasting you in the car. And then you get to the office and you get blasted with more Wi-Fi and electromagnetic off-gassing and electromagnetic and the off-gassing and the fluoro lights, etc. And then you get back in your car at the end of the day, get home, put the telly on, go to bed. At no point have your feet actually touched the ground. At no point has your body had a chance to physically discharge all that electromagnetic radiation. So not having your bare feet on wet ground or on the wet grass or in some sand or near the ocean, that having that is a huge release of a whole bunch of energy, including just everyday stress and so on. But electromagnetically, and I can't explain that science to you, you can look it up. It's a massive thing we're all missing out on. So we are getting bombarded all the time, and we're not getting a chance to offload it. And I think it's a big opportunity for all of us. Is whenever I'm feeling stressed, I'll just get my feet off and the shoes off, I should say, and go and walk on the grass and walk around our property here. And I always come back feeling a lot more refreshed and mentally focused again.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it speaks to the question: are we matter emitting energy, or are we energy emitting matter? And if you start to get deep into that rabbit hole, which I don't think we're going to do today, it's pretty evident that we are, we're energy. And when you do talk about all the man-made sources of electrical currents and electromagnetic frequencies and all of that stuff, it's how could we not be affected by that? We're so much we're made up of so much water, and water is like the biggest conductor of energy as well, like electricity. And yeah, you are right, there is so much actual science behind it, and it just comes back to really simple practices of putting your feet on the ground.
You call it earthing, is what it is. So if you're going to Google it, look it up. And I think for kids too, I notice that with the kids, with little ones, is if they're sitting the whole day in this kind of environment on Zoom, you confront screens all day at school and at home, and they're not literally, there's not many opportunities in the modern world, especially in a city, I guess, to be bare feet on the grass or in the earth, and as a result, they're not connected to the earth. As you say, Mother Earth is there; she'll receive it all. She'll take it off, like on a physical level, it gets taken from you. And the other part of that, I guess, is we're disconnected from our gut biome, from the soil biome as well. We're not in the soil, we're not in the earth, and therefore, we have this massive problem with the gut biome, because the soil and the gut are very well connected in terms of the microbiology there.
Yeah,
it's another rabbit hole we go down, but that's a favourite topic if you want to explore it one day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we won't go down that rabbit hole today, but I'm sure you might be aware of the work that Zach Bush has done in that space, and he's one of my favourite people in the world right now, Zach Bush. Yeah, and the way he speaks to it, it is very easy to digest. Essentially, it's so well articulated, and how we can all actually bring it back to a very practical level in our own lives. And like just on that, mate, like we spoke a lot before about how to, how people go around this world with like a title and a business that they're trying to uphold, but there is a huge need to connect with who you are as a person, so you don't kind of lose track of what is actually driving your existence in the world. What are the things that you found to be really effective in trying to uncover that and allow people to see that in themselves? What are the tools and what are the things you've used?
Yeah, so I guess the extension of this thought is, I talked about some of the guys who was driving from this sense of identity and trying to identify or be valuable in the world or be of worth. But in this sort of more of the, organics and regen ag and biodiversity space, which is what we're currently working in startups in that space now, and really, activating great ideas and those looking after the planet, if you like. There's a lot of businesses that are, there's a lot of injustice in that space. And there's a lot of things need to be fixed. And there's a lot of, really sort of people on their high horse saying this needs to change, and rightly so. It does need to change, and there's some big injustices and things that are really inherently wrong with the system and so on. And so the business tends to be driven from that place of either anger or righteousness or, grief for the planet, or, there's emotional drivers as well. And there's nothing wrong with that, because there's nothing wrong with it. It can be very powerful, and a lot of great businesses have been built on very strong emotional, woundings, if you like. But my argument there personally is, well, yeah, but it doesn't feel like a lot of fun for the business owner to actually have to heal their wounding by expressing it in a business and spending their life feeling, So you talk about the tools to do that. So I hope that makes sense. But I think the point is, if you're building a business from, let's call it a lower order emotion like grief or anger or fear, or any kind of movement from that space, it might resonate with a whole bunch of people, but it's not necessarily going to be good for a lot of people and necessarily good for you. It might make money, but so I think it's worth uncovering what is driving us in that regard, and as an extension of that, give us, and the tool to do that is, first of all, just to stop and have a look at it and feel into it, and give yourself, some time off away from the device and maybe meditate and have a walk on the beach and, allow some space to feel, which is something which we typically, I certainly never get taught that at school. That wasn't something we got encouraged in my life. It's something I've had to learn in later life. I was resisted that for a long time, but, having space to actually feel what's going on underneath that. And then once there's a bit of daylight shone on these things, we can then work with them and then say, well, is this the right space for me to be building this business from, this anger or grief or fear or whatever it may be? And then possibly choose or transcend that into a different sort of vibrational frequency or emotional space and start building and attracting from a new space. And the tool that I'm very fond of using, called Dr. David Hawkins, created a scale of consciousness. And he talks about everything in the world, whether it be an idea or a person or a thing or an organization, having an emotion, having a vibrational frequency, which, and again, I'm not by any means an expert. I use this as a tool. I can't explain it well, but, there's a quantum science to back that up apparently now. That's sort of pretty well understood. But if everything's got a frequency, we can measure the frequency. And his way of measuring frequencies was through the medium of muscle testing, using the body's natural response to going strong or weak according to holding either a substance or a thought of something in against your body. So by using this muscle testing, we can sort of figure out what the frequency is of the emotion we're building our business from. We can figure out the frequency of the idea that we're trying to create, the frequency of the people we might bring into business. The product we want to launch, we can test the frequency of that or the potential frequency of it. So there's a whole rabbit hole you can go down there, right? So it's a few rabbit holes on this conversation. But what I love about that is it's an exponential scale. So and you can look up Dr. David Hawkins' work, but under 200 on the scale. It goes between 1 and 1,000. Under 200 is sort of the lower order emotions, things like grief and sadness and anger and righteousness and things. And above 200, the scale of 200, you get into things like courage, willingness, and then moves up into acceptance and reason. And then above reason, it moves up into ideas like, love. And above love is unconditional love and so on. And it goes up to, so you have people like, Mother Teresa celebrates up somewhere at 700 in this high state of unconditional love and, transcendence. Adolf Hitler's somewhere down in the 20s or 30s because he's just this horrible, angry, disgusting, excuse for a human being who's just thoroughly expressed his wounding on the world in the most horrible way. And then you have these higher level things. So they're extremes of it. Now, I guess as it applies to business, it gives us as business owners an opportunity to see where we're coming from and where we would be ideally best coming from in terms of the emotional driver. Would your business be better off driven from anger at injustice in the world, or would you be better off driven or created from a space of love of your fellow human being? And it's not an exact formula there that I can prescribe to everyone, but to my mind, the answer is pretty obvious. And I like the idea that one Mother Teresa in the world, to use an example, balances out millions, tens of millions of the rest of the population who are stuck in anger and grief and so on. So there's a balance, and these higher, it's actually an exponential scale. So the higher up the scale you go, the more impact you have. And my marketing and business brain applies that. When they talk about it on a spiritual level, how it balances out the humanity. I think it from a business point of view and go, well, one great business that calibrates at 500 or above or up to 1,000 can positively impacts tens of millions of people as a result. So it's a beautiful thing to play with, and I think it's a great tool. You can stick a chart on your wall and sort of see where you're coming from and where you're going towards and what your idea calibrates at. And the calibration of people really interests me. When we bring people into our group, I always muscle test what their vibration is. It sounds weird, but what are they resonating at? And will their resonance lift the resonance of our Wild Idea group, for example? And so that's why I always hope that we start the Friday morning Zoom call at a certain frequency as a group, and by the end of it, we've gone up a number of notches. Everyone walks away going, "Wow!" That's a theory behind it. Hopefully, it's playing out. You're a participant. You can tell me.
I've definitely come off a few of those. A few of those sessions with a huge pep in my step for the rest of the Friday, and then the week going on from there. I'm in that group with a couple other people, and the first thing you can expect after we get off one of those Zoom calls is a text message or another follow-up message from everyone else going, "Oh my God, how good was that? We're going to save the world. Things are going to be great." What's the
just so that, but I think the world needs at this point in time more high frequency people. I think this is the one thing I did want to sort of throw into this. It's thinking about the podcast ahead of time was this idea, and I had my 50th birthday last week, and I had this beautiful opportunity to have this big long walk on the beach by myself, which doesn't happen normally when you got three little kids, and I just got that real download on the beach, that real knowledge of I sort of asked the question, what's my next 50 years going to look like? Being optimistic, and that idea of just bringing more high frequency people into alignment really excites me, including obviously aspiring for that for myself. But, as COVID and the fear, you watch the news now, it's just fear and it's anger at people who aren't wearing their mask or whatever. It tells me it's so horrible to watch. I can't understand how people let the kids watch the news right now. It's just, I don't watch it myself, other than for short snippets to see what, lockdown we're having this week kind of thing. I like to keep abreast of it, but otherwise I'll turn the rest off because it just is negativity and bombardment. And that's a state most people are in. They're terrified of the next door neighbor sneezing on them, rightly or wrongly. And so there's fear and there's distrust and there's anger and there's this, there's a lot of negativity out there, you could say for good reason. So we need more than ever for, avatar-like beings to emerge who've got hope and unconditional love and, willingness and courage, but also just, love and acceptance as their driving states of being. Not even their driving force. I was going to say their driving force, but it's not even that. It's just a state of being. If we can be loving and understanding and, transcend those lower order type emotional reactions. It's not battling against them. It's not pushing back and saying, I want to use anger back against you. It's actually just transcending it in ourselves and doing that as much as we can. And that, I think, if there's ever a time in history to bring that in, an opportunity to do that, I think now is it. And I think on a positive sign, we've got all that going on in the news, but then I talk to you guys on Friday morning. I'm like, here's a small microcosm of 70 people who've got absolutely the best intention for the world in their daily plans, so there's, and I meet a lot of young people nowadays, and they're, 15, 16, right up to early 20s, early 30s, they're on those high frequencies already. It's almost like they've been born into a new level of awareness. Like I met these 25-year-old kids going, how did you get so bloody clever so quickly? It took me, you know what I mean? It took me 50 years and I'm still figuring it out. And you guys are sort of there, they've already got this sense of awareness and self and direction in the world. And it's not all of them, but it's exciting, and that's yourself included, mate. I think you're in your 30s, it looks like, yeah? Doing some good stuff in the world.
I am, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I am in my 30s. I'm good stuff. Yeah. I'm working on it, mate. Yeah.
Yeah. So, there's some hope there is what I'm getting at. And then there's an opportunity for all of us to step up and really just get out of that fear and anger and say, how are we going to reflect? What are we going to resonate at the world? And of course, as soon as that happens, something will come along and trigger you and really, it happened to me. I was come off the beach feeling all like that. Something happened with the kids or something else, and I got the shits, and triggered anger and all those things. So it's easy to get tripped back out of that as well, which is human. But yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's one of the most it's a really important thing to understand about something such as meditation. Meditation isn't the state that you acquire for the period of time that you're meditating. Say you're sitting down for 35 minutes, and meditation isn't about that 35 minutes. It's about how you take that state that you achieve in that 35 minutes out into the other 23 hours of your day. That's when you're really meditating, and that's when you're really taking that practice and that skill out to a practical place in the world. And I think, mate, there's so much to talk to with what you've just said. And that was one of the pivotal points with the Wild Idea Incubator that I just thought, wow, we are really in something special here, because you brought out that scale that David R. Hawkins created. And it's so funny because I took a screenshot of it and I've got it up right now. And because I was just like, wow, this is unreal. And I can't help but think that this isn't, like you say, this isn't just these aren't the states that people have in their businesses, but it is the states that they have in all elements of their life. Their relationship to themselves, their relationship to their partners or their kids, their friends, and just to kind of blow it up a little bit more, like you said, the scale actually starts at around 20, and it goes all the way up to 1,000. And if you look at the bottom and you look at 20, and I guess what people can do is just like think about moments in their life where they might feel these things, and think about moments in their life where they may feel the higher end of the scale. So if you're in 20, your emotions that you feel are humiliation, and then as you go up towards 200, it's humiliation, blame, despair, regret, anxiety, craving, hate, scorn, and then 200 is affirmation. And that's kind of, as you say, the turning point. And then on the scale from 250 all the way up to 1,000, the emotions that you're feeling in those states are from affirmation, trust, optimism, forgiveness, understanding, reverence, serenity, bliss, and ineffable. And I think, I just wanted to say that because they're very common emotions that we all feel. And if we do take time to be aware of what emotion we're feeling in a certain experience or a certain moment or any time of the day, then we're going to start to really understand when we are operating at a higher frequency because we feel that emotion, as opposed to when we're operating at a much lower frequency. And then I guess use that to then figure out what's really serving us in our lives and what is really not serving us in our lives. And how does that, because it all starts with us, how does that then affect every single other person that I come in contact with? And how am I adding to the frequency that we create, such as on this phone call, or how am I taking away from the higher frequency that you have and bringing it down levels? So, I was just so stoked when you brought that up. I was like,
I'm glad you're using it. Yeah. It's worth pointing out, though, I don't want to come across and make it out like, it's some, simplistic, easy thing to do necessarily for all of us. It's quite the opposite in a lot of regards. I mean, I don't want to, my personal experience of transcending a few of these levels, and I'm still doing it all the time. It is one of, a lot of wailing and gnashing of teeth at times. And, some of it can be as easy as letting go and it just, let go and that's the end of it. And others can be extremely hard to let go of. And it can be a very difficult thing at times to let go of anger and blame and humiliation and shame, and also it's not, I don't want to make it out like it's something everyone should be doing because it's so easy. It's actually not. It's a very courageous step to take to move into on that path. And we've all got trauma, we've all got some shit that's happened to us, and we've all got some tales of woe. And most of the time if you look hard into that, a lot of people are doing a lot worse than you think you are at the time. It's about having the courage to take that journey and taking a step at a time. Like, if you're stuck in fear, which a lot of people are, having courage is a step up from fear. You don't jump from fear to unconditional love all of a sudden. You go from fear into courage, and then from courage, you eventually move into, say, acceptance and say, oh, it's okay, everything's okay in the world, And from there, it's like, I'm willing to go and do something about that. And then we move into things like reason and go, I can see how I can make a difference. And, so it's step by step and then exponential jumps. And like I certainly can say this from my own experience, is that it's just no idea what was ahead of me when I started on this path. I opened this Pandora's box I felt very stuck about 15 years ago, and I got out of a business that I had been my life. I took my identity, I was in the fitness industry, and I got out of a business with the tail between my legs and had to basically go and figure out who the hell I was without this big illusion of the big sports car and the big muscles and the fit and the gym and the whole deal. So I had this persona going on. It wasn't until all that got stripped away from me by external factors, really, of my own creation, but it wasn't like I chose to have it stripped away from me. Maybe not consciously anyway. And it wasn't until all that stuff was gone and I was left with no alternative. I was nothing to hide behind anymore, because I was in bodybuilding and the fitness industry. So you had this whole very cliched persona happening. And once that's gone, it's like, okay, well, who the hell am I now? And I had to go and ask some of these questions. And then 15 years later, I'm still asking them, or more than that, actually, more than 15 years now. So, and that hasn't always been easy, and it can be very challenging. Can be very hard to let go. Hardest thing sometimes is just letting go of stuff that we hold on to. Letting go of our story. It can be very, very hard. It can be very easy too for a lot of people. But certainly, I found it. I did it the hard way. I know that for sure. Yeah.
I think. Yeah. I mean, that's. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, mate. Because I feel like there's a lot of people that probably don't really. And I'm one of them. I'm not saying that there's people out there and I'm perfect at all. from my own experience, we talk a lot about speaking with I language because, we can't prescribe the medicine for others, but we can describe it from our own point of view and what's affected us. And from my point of view, there is sometimes that underlying feeling that something isn't really quite right, but where do you turn and what do you do to start to figure out what that deep down feeling is and how do you make those changes? And like you say, if we do refer back to that scale, like you are in a state of like fear and you can be angry, and working through that and understanding what you're scared of and what you might be angry of, you come into a place of awareness of that, and then you can start to build that courage to deal with it, build the ability to accept the things that you can't change, and the courage to take on and change the things that you can change. And I feel like, I don't know if you have done it much, but I've done a lot of work with cold exposure and ice baths, and it's so funny because if you refer back to this scale, you're standing on the edge of a frozen lake and you're feeling this, anxiety, which is, and then as you work your way up this scale, it's exactly the same process that happens in your mind when you start to take steps towards this frozen lake and break through the ice and get into the ice and sit in there. And, you're standing on the edge of the lake, you've got anxiety, you walk closer, you've got a craving to get out of there. Then you're like hating the situation. Then you start to get courage to get in the lake. And then there's a moment of acceptance when you're in this freezing cold water. And then you work your way up and you eventually get to a moment of like serenity and calmness and a sense of peace once you're sitting in this ice bath that 4 minutes before was making you anxious, and a huge sense of fear was associated with it. And I just feel like it's such a great little tool to have in your toolbox to use when you're looking at these kind of things. So I thought I'd add then.
Good analogy. Yeah.
What have you seen to be the biggest points of resistance for people, or maybe it isn't a point of resistance, maybe it's just education. What are the biggest things that you've seen that do hold people back in a space that they might, deep down not really want to exist in?
Big question, but I think, look, I'll speak to the business side of it specifically, right? Because I don't want to come across like I'm some personal development guru, because I'm a personal development student, not a guru on it. And I just apply those tools to the sandpit or the playground of business, if you like. And I think in business, without doubt, it's just simply, you can have the best business plan in the world, best business idea, best business model. You can have the best team, and you can also have the best sort of execution of a plan. And I saw this over many years. I've worked with thousands of clients now over the years, probably a couple of thousand all up, genuinely. And it gets to a certain point where it stops working, something goes wrong, even though the strategy's perfect and the marketing works and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I guess this is small business primarily. Maybe it works differently at a high level. I don't know, because I've primarily worked in smaller businesses where, the founder is typically the key part of it. And it's the best strategy stops working. And the reason it stops working is because the founder, it's what's going on in here and what's going on for them personally. They become the problem. Or so it's at that point where, and they're not doing it consciously, but they're hanging on to an old paradigm and they're not moving or growing with what's happening. So it's about, we heard this word pivot come up a lot now in business with COVID and everything. And I think it is about just being in the flow of something and responding with your own personal expansion at times of stress or, chaos or any kind of obstacle comes up. It's like, okay, as a founder or as a business owner or as a person, how do I grow and expand as a human being in order to become, I've just met a slightly bigger problem than what I'm used to. If I know how to solve it, it's not a problem anymore. I'll just fix it. But beyond, when we get to those obstacles, we go, geez, I really don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And the common thing is, well, I'm going to dig my heels in and do what I used to do for the old school problem, the old type of problems, and do, I'll respond with more of the same. which typically doesn't work because it's a new vibrational, you've attracted a new higher level problem, if you like. So to me, that's an indicator that the business owner is being called to grow and learn and expand and let go of their previous identity or what they thought was right. And, maybe experiment with being wrong, experiment with letting go of their story and letting go of, their preconceived idea of what's going to happen. And lean into, I don't know what the hell's happening, so therefore I'll take advice, I'll be curious, and I'll learn and I'll grow and I'll see this as a learning experience. I think it's the old saying, we don't know what we don't know yet. We know what we know what we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know. And that's how willing you are to step into that place. You don't know what you don't know. That's probably the key to being a successful, certainly in the startup world, and that's offered humbly. I'm not saying I've got all the answers, but that's probably the other thing I think is on a broader level is it's not really related, but I think it's important. It's an important thing, I think, just to come back. You asked me before about tools, what tools we use, and one of the things I've done all sorts of stuff in order to get through things, and I've done everything from physical, spiritual, mental. Back in the day when I was a powerlifter and bodybuilder, it was all about visualization and so on. And I think we all have the ability, and I've certainly proved this. We all have the ability to manifest whatever the hell we want. We can get stuff and outcomes we want if we're strong enough and focused enough. And I proved that in my career as a sort of semi-amateur, semi-professional bodybuilder, if you like. When I say semi-professional, I did it professionally in all regards except getting paid. And but it was, visualization was a great tool. Then it got to a point where I thought these goals and the ticking boxes didn't necessarily just keep making me happy. So what is it that I want to achieve next? And just achieving things lost a bit of its luster, because I thought no matter what I achieve, I'm still going to be the same person inside, not necessarily any happier. So there was a sense of disconnect in that for me. And I think the tools that then came about was when I then went and thought, so I explored the physical side of what was possible. Let's go and see how many weights I can lift. Then I explored the mental side of what I can visualize. And that was very much up here. And then I got to that point of unhappiness with that, because I thought, I can have the biggest cars in the world or whatever. It's still not making me any, or biggest trophies. I could realize the futility of chasing. Well, let's go explore the emotional side and just see what's going on there. And that was a big, deep, dark journey for me, because I'd never touched on that stuff before. And exploring that as a tool. And that was things like men's circles are great tools for that. And, groups where you have a chance to, facilitators will give you a chance to speak and be in touch with that. That was an amazing experience for me. Very scary at the time. But then the next level up is that sort of spiritual level and diving into that and going, okay, well, now I feel fairly emotionally, tuned in and express what else is there. And this is part of the adventure in life for me, is looking at the spiritual side. And I've used tools like Psych K. I don't know if you're familiar with this word, Psych K. Bruce Lipton made it popular with his book, The Biology of Belief. And I won't try to explain all that, but basically it's, our thoughts affect our health and our physiology and our outcomes in life. Our brain dictates it. And Abraham Hicks and these sort of teachers all speak to it as well. The Psych K gives us a tool to actually identify and reprogram some subconscious belief patterns that have been, kind of put in there as like subconscious, like a piece of software that's been installed at a very young age, and it's sort of still running us as adults without our awareness. Gives you a chance to identify and shift those things. That's been an enormous tool for me. And the other part I was probably leading up to, the spiritual aspect of that is, for me, has been using a little bit of Psych K, but also having had now some experience with sacred plant medicines and ceremonial plant medicines, such as ayahuasca and these things, which is sort of a psychedelic. Many people know what that is now, I guess. But for me, it was a no-go zone. I was always worried of health and fitness and taking drugs and all that kind of nonsense. And this was introduced to me a few years back, and I had this profound experiences with this psychedelic plant that just gave me a full understanding, a visceral understanding that it just solved that illusion of separation. We're all one. We're all connected. We're all one being, literally. And it's easy to say that, and I know everyone, it's a common, fairly ubiquitous saying now, but just delving very deeply into that idea that, you know, the sense of separation is just an illusion. And once that was really embodied for me, it almost became impossible to do the wrong thing in life. So for me, you know, life is about exploring that and keep coming back to that. I think recognizing that coming back to, you know, being of service to each other, loving each other, creating joyfully and doing the best I can for my life, but also trying to impact others. It's like, man, if there's anything, you know, what else is there? Is there anything else we can do that would be better than that? And once that separation, that veil of separation disappears, it gets pretty clear. You know, again, I'm not suggesting I live that way 24/7, float around on fairy dust and clouds, because it's the opposite. You know, I get stuck in shit like everyone else, and I get angry and all the rest of it. But I try to come back to that one. Try most of the time.
Well, that's a very brave and welcomed share there, mate. I appreciate that. Far out. Talk about rabbit holes that we could go down on this chat. Far out. So how did that? So okay, how did that lead you to where you are now with Venture Organics, and why did you feel drawn to work in that space? Because, you know, as you've mentioned, you've worked in the health and fitness industry, in the business development industry. What you teach could be applicable to any industry essentially, and you've chosen to go down you've chosen to work in the industry that you are with, you know, regenerative agriculture, organics, making, you know, nutritiously dense produce available to others, with your and also working with businesses that are trying to do that. And so how did you land in that space?
Well, this is where I come back, you know, get away from that, take that esoteric guff I've just been talking about, all the higher level sort of things, and bring this back into the practical. You know, what's that look like in practicality? I think is, you know, I've never been one of those people who likes to sit on the top of a mountain and pontificate. I want to get in the world and do stuff, right? So all those learnings and everything I was just alluding to, for me, have direct translation into what are my actions in daily life. You know, what's that mean for me? And I have enormous trouble being congruent now. You know, if I believe what I just told you and then do something that is inherently going to, you know, fuck the environment or do, you know, whatever, I can't do it. It just doesn't work on any kind of level. I've tried it a few times and it backfires on me very quickly. I get the universe gives me a little tickle with a feather, and then that doesn't work. I get a brick across the head, and if that doesn't work, I don't listen. Then the truck comes along, knocks me out. But I with this sort of new level of understanding of life, I guess for me, okay, how does this translate to my daily work? And one of the things I've always believed and cared about deeply was, you know, good food, and you know, how lucky I am to be in a, you know, I've manifested myself onto a beautiful farm near Byron Bay, and, you know, I feel incredibly grateful for that. But particularly that I get to give my 3 kids a beautiful, healthy diet, you know, most of the time. You know, they with slight variation. For the most part, they eat some bloody good quality tucker. And it's a lot of it's homegrown or grown by local farmers around here, and it's spray free. It hasn't got full of chemicals and so on. So I just thought, well, my kid's going to have that. Surely every kid deserves that. You know, that should be something every kid gets. So the Venture Organic thing was really the same. Why should organic food, fresh, healthy organic food, be a premium, and old, stale, sprayed, chemical-ridden food is the standard? So that is just so thoroughly wrong. So from that perspective, I thought every kid deserves good food. So let's how do we go and put that into motion? What's the business? What has the biggest impact I can make personally with my unique skill set? You know, I'm really bloody terrible at a whole bunch of things. You don't want me managing your accounts and things, for example, or fixing your car or whatever. But, you know, I have a skill set in activating or seeing the potential of helping people explore the potential of themselves and their business, I guess. And I thought, well, I can go out and innovations that can disrupt the system, because I saw that is symptomatic of the food system being really basically buggered. all right, is that, if organic food is a special treat and non-organic food is a standard, we got something seriously going wrong, right? So how do we disrupt that? And the best answer I come up with, let's help startups and let's see how innovation can help shift that. So that's sort of what led me into that path. And rather than me do it all myself, how do I leverage my ability? Let's go and, assist or activate or catalyze outcomes by, putting founders like yourself into a process that can really set them on fire and make the biggest impact possible. And I did that in the health and wellness area, in the working with hundreds and thousands or thousands, a couple of thousand of wellness practitioners over the years. But then, as I guess the extension of that was, I then met a guy called Charles Massey, who wrote the book called Call of the Reed Warbler, that many of you will know. And Charlie was really inspired. I was just blown away when I first heard him speak. I was lucky enough, he spoke here in Bangalore to talk. And I also met Charlie Arnott, who was another Charlie, but another regenerative ag spokesperson and a farmer who's now a really good mate of mine. And I became very aware by talking to these guys that it wasn't just about organic food. It was about a method of agriculture and farming and food production that is about a healthy planet, a sustainable and regenerative food system, and it is a fundamental part of human health. And I went, wow, this is not just about organic food on plates. This is about how we treat the planet. This is about carbon sequestration and stopping putting chemicals into the soil. It's about the soil biome, how it affects our gut biome. It's about, just reversing climate change. It's about putting quality, nutrient-dense food, not just, fresh, glossy food that looks good on the shelf, but it's got nothing in it in terms of nutrients, but nutrient density and therefore human health as a result. And communities and people getting back to the soil and back to the farm and all these benefits, myriad of benefits. And I was almost looking at it going, this can't be, regenerative agriculture can't be as good as it sounds. And the more I looked into it, the more I was convinced it was, and that wasn't the case. And I went, man, this is better than organics. This is everything. There's so much to contribute here, and I just realised that's the space I want to make my impact in. So I researched, and I've spent a heap of time connecting with all the people around the world who are, big in this space. And I just get very excited by the potential of it as a movement, not just as a way of farming, but a way of, community interaction. Like I said, the way we treat the soil, where we can get out of chemical. I tell you, there's one angle I always like to comment on in this area. This is me getting angry about the system. I realised that in the 1990s, early 90s, and feel free to fact check me on this, right? But I don't pretend I'm the exact thing, but this is my understanding is in the 1990s, early 90s, we started as a human race, the human species decided to start spraying carcinogenic, toxic shit all over our number one Western society food source in the form of wheat. And we started spraying it with glyphosate and Roundup Ready wheat and stuff happened in the early 90s. And that was the beginning of us poisoning our food system from before it's out of the ground. So that happened in my lifetime. We started poisoning this stuff, and at the same time, biodiversity's halved in the last 50 years and all this. And I'm like, as a food system, if we're going to rely on one company, Monsanto, to poison us from the word go, so we're eating, we're all supposed to be gluten intolerant. I'd say we're Roundup intolerant because that Roundup's in our wheat, right? And then they turn into Bayer, and now they're selling you medicine to help you get better or die better from cancer. All this, it just it staggers me the depth of the idiocy and the corruption and the insidiousness of that whole system. And yet, regenerative agriculture not only provides an alternative to that, it provides a solution to all those things. It repairs all those systems, and it can make farmers more money. It can be available for consumers at a better price. So there's so many upshots of it. And I thought, man, this is where I've got to spend my time. And and I don't pretend to be a farming expert. I'm not. There's people like Charlie Arnott and Charlie Massey who are. I'm kind of the conductor in that ecosystem where I can pull these guys together. people like Nigel Sharp and Sam Marwood at Odonata and Tiverton Ag Fund are doing this amazing work. They're all part of, the Odonata founders. There's some great people in the industry and doing this 7-generational work at a time where it's more crucial than ever. A lot of you have seen this quote. The UN had 3 or 4 years ago now said, we've only got 50, 60 harvests left on our current agricultural system. So this is the United Nations saying, our food system's fucked, by the way. In the next 10 to 20 years, expect it to crash. We need something else. And we haven't got an answer for it on a systemic level. Well, we've got an answer, but we're not embracing the answer. We're continuing like it's going to go forever. So in my children's lifetime, before I have grandchildren, we're going to have some major food shortages based on the fact that, the soil we've been ripping all the nutrients out of and is dead, and it's literally just dead dirt now. It's not going to keep producing for us. Now, that might play into some corporate banker's pocket, but it's not good for humanity, and it's certainly not the future I want for my kids. So, you talk about food sovereignty, and we talk about the ability for the people to own their food system, and, all these great ideals. I think COVID, is highlighting a lot of that for a lot of us to realise that, it's one thing to run out of bloody toilet paper, but if you're running out of fresh food, then it's a real problem. I've heard that's happening in Brazil and different places now. There are some food shortages, and the US are starting to show up. I think it's a very real thing, and investing in innovation and the transition to regenerative systems of food production. That's everything from holistic management of cattle right through to permaculture, and there's a whole raft of techniques around that. But I think it's just a fundamental for all of us now, and I also think I've had this conversation yesterday with an investor who's really keen to get into the space, and he's saying to me, he's got significant money to put into it. He's saying, why is no one doing this at scale yet? Why aren't we being offered this? And I said, because we're at the beginning of the wave. I really believe we're at the beginning of a major movement towards a regenerative, smart food system that gets away from the yoke of the Monsantos of the world who are just poisoning us and laughing at us, in my opinion. How anyone works for a corporation that does shit like that is beyond me, and I apologise for anyone who takes offence to that, but it's just beyond me when you really look into how they operate. But with better ways to do it, I think the system for that transition to happen, there's 3 big things, and that is we need a financial system that backs regenerative agriculture as a serious, profitable way forward. In other words, farmers need to access capital, and the capital markets need to recognise this as an investment opportunity. Not because it's impact and it's a nice idea, but because it actually works and there's good returns in it. Secondly, I think farmers need to continue to be educated and shown that there's a profitable way to make this happen. So even there's a whole bunch of farmers out there doing this amazing work on the land. There's some incredible people. I've met the most great stewards of country, who have full respect for the indigenous ways, and they're amazing individuals, spiritual beings on the land in bloody Akubras, but they're the converted. I think we need to get the 70, 80, 90% of those who aren't converted attracted to this because of the financial returns attached to it. They don't have to keep buying chemicals. They can make a better return on their investment, selling produce at a better rate because it's better nutrient quality. They're more drought resilient, they're bushfire resilient. So those kind of, the natural capital of the thing, the government's now talking about biodiversity credits for farmers. So there's a business case there that will bring farmers across to a different way of doing things, which is kind of why they went across to chemical agriculture in the first place, because there's more money in it at the time. And then the final piece of the puzzle, the 3 pieces of this is the final piece, I think, in the transition is around getting consumers switched on to the truth about their food. And it's more than just about organic, and it's helping them understand the toxicity that is actually in most of the food we buy. I mean, Roundup is in nearly everything. Glyphosate isn't everywhere. And, again, just go fact check on this stuff. It's in our water supply, because it doesn't go away, this stuff. We're killing ourselves, and it disrupts. Zach Bush, you're a Zach Bush fan, you've known this stuff, right? But I tell you, it kills off our gut biome. It's an antibiotic, and yet it's in our food system. We're ingesting it every day. It's in our water. So we've got to get that out of our system, and particularly the way to do that is obviously eating fresh quality, healthy food, non-toxic. But having consumers choosing not only organic but also nutrient dense. Like I come out of the health and wellness industry. Selling vitamin supplements is something I'm not against. I've been in that industry. I think it's a great industry. I take the things all the time. But it only exists because our food's such crap. You know, like we don't need to take vitamins if we have a healthy diet, if it's genuinely healthy diet, right? But you can't get enough vitamin C from eating tomatoes anymore because they haven't got any left in them. Whereas, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, there was. So nutrient density, consumer drivers for good quality regeneratively produced food, I think is the key thing. So the more companies like Patagonia are out there doing that, and companies, even General Mills, I believe in the US, a big food company, are doing, regenerative branding and trying to get people switched on to the where their food comes from. That's never been more important. So I think they're the three pillars of the transition in my mind, and that's after many years of about 3 or 4 years now of just digging in, going, why isn't this more popular? I think there's your answer. That's my take on it. So hence why we're working in the innovation space with people like Odonata, with Wild Idea, with my business called Venture Organic, and I'm also doing an incubator program for the regional development mid North Coast of New South Wales for Kerry Grace, who's got a great program happening on Norfolk Island. The vision is it can become a regenerative wellness destination, a place you can go and get healthy, fix your gut biome, as well as have a beautiful experience. So innovation and business, I believe, is the key to making those transitions happen. I think, I'm not going to wait for government funding to happen. I'm going to not wait for philanthropy. Let's see businesses are sustainable and regenerative in their own right, help make that. I think that's the most powerful tool we can use, I think, is business. There's my rant finished.
Mate, I hold to that. Amen. You know what? That is, thank you. Thank you for having the courage to go on that path, mate. I think it's, I can only speak for myself, but I think that is a very, very far out, like just a way out of this situation that we do find ourselves in. And you said we can ignore it for as long as we want, but there is, an incredible amount of suffering that's ahead of us if we don't stop just playing by the model that's been given to us for the moment. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think we're questioning the model, looking into it, and I think if most people were really fully aware of it, which I wasn't. I got to be honest. I'm an organic consumer, but 5 years ago I didn't know any of this stuff. And I'll come back to what I said. I've just given you the big rant and what pisses me off and frightens me and all that, but I do like to keep coming back to, well, ultimately, I actually don't feel this is courageous of me to do this, at all. I'm just doing it because it feels really good to do it. It's probably cost me a bit of money, to be honest with you, in what I could otherwise be making. The opportunity costs, there's been a transition period without a doubt. And that was a bit butt clenching at times. Like, oh Christ, we're going to make it, But man, we're only here for a short space of time, so I'd rather go out and do something that really fires me up and excites me. Ultimately, I'd rather go broke trying something I love than, be stable doing something I hate. You know what I mean? So to me, it's not even courage. It's actually just because it feels a lot more fun and I get to talk to far more interesting people and, feel more alive every day. So it's a pretty simple choice in that regard.
Hey, it sounds like a pretty good way to go about the short time that we do inhabit this place. So Adam, thanks so much, mate. Thanks for, I knew I had to get you on. I knew you would have a good rant in you somewhere. So, and you delivered.
My pleasure.
I might just edit the whole podcast to the final 15 minutes and we'll just put that out there, mate.
Oh, well, whatever I'll be in your hands. I don't mind.
It was actually,
thank you. Thanks for hosting. Yeah, appreciate it.
It was actually very Zach Bush of you, mate. I don't know if you've listened to many podcasts with him or conversations.
He's my hero. I love Zach's stuff. He's yeah.
He always finishes with a home run, that's for sure, just like you did, mate.
Well, Zach's, like I said, he's someone I really admire in the world. I haven't met him yet, but he's on my list of people to meet. I find him one of the most inspiring, interesting guys out there at the moment. Don't take my word for all this. Go listen to Zach because he's got science to back it up. Anyone listening.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, mate, a huge thank you from myself and also my crew at the crew that I work alongside for Wild Places. Thanks to yourself and Odinata for everything that you've been able to introduce us to in the Wild Idea Incubator. And, I hope you guys can continue doing that project again next year, because it is something that I've been blown away by. I highly encourage everyone to get involved with, and just you guys have really lifted the belief and the spirit in a lot of people that are in that group. And it's been so awesome to be a part of and watch grow over the last 8 weeks, mate. So huge thank you for that. And again, thanks a lot for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
Hey everyone, thanks again for joining us here at Stokely. We really appreciate your time. And we really hope that you got some value out of that podcast. That's what it's all about, putting something out there to help you connect, listen, learn, and evolve, all through the art of conversation. So thanks a lot for your time. It's really appreciated. Drop us a line at Stokely on Instagram and let us know your thoughts on this podcast. Until next time, keep well wherever you are in the world, and we really appreciate your time and effort in joining us today. So thank you, and talk to you soon. Ciao.